Good morning. It is Friday, the 5th of April, 2024. We're on the Ultimate World Cruise and we're in Seoul, Korea. And our objective was to get to the demilitarized zone so we could understand what that was about. And apologize for not having a complete understanding of this, but our tour guide was very difficult to understand and didn't really explain much. So what you do is you take a gondola from the South Korean side across the river, which is the middle of the demilitarized zone runs down the middle of that river that we crossed over on the gondolas. And then you come to this place where we are here, which is an observation point. So supposedly we're on the North Korean side of the demilitarized zone, but she said it was civilian patrol, which I really don't understand. There's a bunch of signs on the fences on both sides which say there are minefields on both sides of those barbed wire fences. This is the observation point. The gondolas are off to the left behind that tree that you come across. So we actually came across that river on the gondolas into this section of the DMZ. And there's like two different zones. There's one zone of a couple of kilometers and then another zone behind that on both sides. So we went up to the observatory on the top of the highest peak. We're on the South Korean side of the DMZ. You could see the river out there in two places. Yeah, so the river that is out there, you can just barely see it straight up in the middle, and then slightly you could see a little piece of it on the left of the screen. And then there's a zone down to that barbed wire fence that you can see in front. And then there's another zone from that going south a further few kilometers to the actual outside border of the DMZ. And so we had to go through a military checkpoint. We had to have our passports examined, and a military guy came on the bus and checked every passport, compared it with your picture. So to get into this exclusion zone, you have to have military approval. And I was surprised. There are people living in the demilitarized zone. They're actually citizens of the UN, because this zone on both sides of that river is controlled by the UN. And unfortunately, it wasn't a very clear day. Off in the distance there in the mountains, that's North Korea. You can't really see it well because my camera didn't have a very good lens, but there's two flagpoles, a North Korean one flying a North Korean flag and a South Korean one flying a South Korean flag on either side of the river. And supposedly out there's another pole that indicates where they signed the armistice. So the two countries are technically still at war and have just signed a ceasefire agreement. But the North Koreans, on a number of occasions, have tried to tunnel underneath the DMZ so that they would have access to South Korea for their troops. And this boat right here, yeah, it's kind of after we did this tour of the DMZ from this South Korean side observation point, we actually went into one of the tunnels that the North Koreans had dug that was discovered by South Korea, and of course blocked off. There are 4 major tunnels that have been discovered, and they suspect there are more, but they don't really know where they are. I think a defector from North Korea gave them the location of the tunnel that we went through. Now we are looking at the South Korean side. We're looking south toward, I think that's Seoul out there way in the distance. I'm not sure. But we were able to stop at a restaurant that was actually in the DMZ. There's a little village there and the citizens of the that live in the DMZ have to get permission to go to South Korea and back. And it's also somewhat difficult, I think, to go in and visit them if you're family. But we had lunch at the restaurant that was in the DMZ and then loaded back on the bus and headed back to the ship. So that's the extent of my knowledge of the DMZ.